Well, after all that long reading, and lots of readings today, Palm Sunday, that's par for the course. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what it all means, because I think that there's so many places one can go, but there's also so many places that one could spend a lot of time. So I want to do this morning what I've done in other Palm Sunday services, and I just want to ask you, now that you've heard the story again, and each year we hear it from a different gospel writer, this time from Matthew, what are some things that jumped out at you that you hadn't remembered from the story before? It's a long, long story. Is there anything that you heard this time that you hadn't remembered from before, or something that was particularly poignant to you based upon what's happened to you this year, what's happened to you this week, what's happened to you in the world, that makes it seem like, oh yes, I don't think I've heard that before yet?
I think that area at the beginning where we have the colt and so forth, the image of Jesus riding in on two animals seems to be a strange one.
Yeah, but it's true, that's what he did. He did ride in on two of them. And yeah, according to Matthew. And so the only way that one can do that is side saddle. You can't straddle both this way. So he was sitting on one with his legs over the other. That's how it's traditionally shown in the scripture coming into Jerusalem. I don't know if that has any particular meaning, but I think that was the way that one greeted the crowds. It was a traditional way. Yeah.
What struck me is sort of a dissonance on some thinking, and maybe is Judas goes and kisses Jesus to show the crowd that, you know, this is Jesus, but here he is in the temple and in the past, and he's preaching. So how did they not, this band of conspirators, how did they not know it was Jesus anyway?
Well, this is one of the ironies of the whole thing. The religious leaders didn't spend a lot of time in the temple.
Okay.
So they may not have known him, or know who he was, or it might have looked different. And it was also night.
Okay.
But I think the implication there is that for religious leaders, they weren't too religious.
I was surprised by Pilate's wife telling about a dream, and I want to know more. Like, I want to know what the dream was. You know, what happened in the dream.
She had a dream, apparently, that said, you know, be wary of this man, so wash your hands of the whole thing.
Right.
Oftentimes in depictions of this in the movies and The Last Temptation of Christ and everything like that, is a little bit more prolonged. She comes to him and she has this terrible dream about what's going to happen, and she tells Pilate to, to stay out of it. The truth be known, even though Pilate is presented here as somewhat of a fair judge, he was a ruthless man. Ruthless. Everybody was deathly afraid of him. And even though he has this idea, here of the, I think in The Last Temptation of Christ, it was played by David Bowie, if I remember correctly. And, sort of a mild manner, okay, well, this is what you want to do, this is what's going to happen. But Pilate was not like that at all. He would have sold his own mother and put her up on the cross with Jesus if he had had the chance or the inclination. And I think that one of the reasons that his wife comes to him is because she sees great trouble in this. And actually what happens...
Including a resurrection, do you think?
I think she sees that, but what happens after this, Pilate stays on for a little bit longer, but he meets a very untimely end himself. I mean, he's removed, and he's greatly disgraced by... This is how ruthless he was. The Romans thought he was so ruthless, they removed him. Because he was too awful, that they didn't want someone like that even ruling. John.
On the last page, where it mentions that the tombs were opened up and many bodies of believers were raised, and then they entered the city and it appeared to many. I had forgotten about that. Is that sort of a metaphor or symbolic, or what was that?
Well, one would have to ask that about the whole story. The whole story could be somewhat metaphoric.
I understand.
Could be metaphorical. It could be somewhat historical. It's, anything is possible. But the tradition of the time was, because of the earthquake and because of the greatness of the event, that it broke open the tombs, and there were many who were resurrected with him. It was just not Jesus' resurrection, but many others also. So this is where a lot of the denominations who are different in their belief system than ours say that the second coming happened then. Jesus came when he was born, then the second coming was then. And that now we're in the end time, and have been all this time.
Quickly, when I was saying about Romans judging Pilate, what struck me was the criminals who were crucified alongside Jesus were mocking and making fun of him. But I don't find that surprising, because I think sinners do that. They like to judge other people, not look at themselves.
Yes, we do.
So I think, right?
Yeah, and in the other gospel account of it, one of the criminals actually is nice and says, "Well, I believe you are who you say you are." Every gospel account has a different writer has a different account.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. The version on the name was where he forgives this other criminal.
He does forgive the other one.
Says you'll be joining me in heaven.
Right, and I think he even has a name in the other one, or one that's attributed to him. Dismas.
At the risk of being asked to leave, this passion usually really moves me. But there's this line here where Jesus says, "You said it, you yourself said that I am the Son of God, and that's not all soon to see it for yourself. Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Mighty One, arriving on the clouds of heaven." And it just says to me, this is delusional, and these people are in a state of mass hysteria.
Well, that is a point of view. And I think that there'd be a lot of people who, looking at the whole story, would say that's true. And looking at the whole gospel would say that's true. A lot of it is quite delusional. As you know, I've been teaching the book of Revelation at Fordham this semester, and every time the more I teach it, the further we get into it, I see the students just shaking their heads saying, "He's lost it now." Just, it's really, this can't even be real. This doesn't even sound real. And the thing about the story is that there's parts you can take from it that seem very real. And how does one discern what was real and what isn't? But even if you didn't do that, does it make the story any less important in its import?
Not in terms of history.
Not in terms of history, perhaps, yeah.
Another difference that I see in Matthew compared to some of the other Gospels, and I like it because it's a wonderful sign of forgiveness, is that although the servant, Caiaphas, had his ear cut off, missing from here is where Jesus took it and reattached it.
Yeah, that's in the Gospel of Luke, because Luke has this whole healing thing going on. So Matthew's thinking, he had his ear cut off, good, let his ear be off. And Luke says, no, we're going to put it back on. That's a kinder Jesus, even at the end. I think that the one thing that struck me this time, and of course I've heard this story and preached on it many, many times, and one of the things I was saying to Anthony about writing my Easter letter to you this time, and maybe you sensed it perhaps in my writing, was that when you said what you had to say about the story, and you said it the first time, and supposedly or hopefully it was your best work, to try to say it another, well, now it's been for 27 years for me, to say it another 26 times, to say, what new can you bring out of this story? What possibly could be relevant and astounding? But I did think of something that I thought I had not heard before, or maybe because it's who we are as a congregation at the moment, or who many of us are, and that it seemed to me that there was a lot of lifting up in this story, but more than anything, I saw a lot of laying down. The people laid down the palm branches for him to come into the city. He lays down his life for what he believes. There's a lot, if you look at the words all the way through, there's a lot of laying down, coming down. The word down, or the whole idea coming down to the ground, everything that appears a lot of times. And I hadn't noticed that before. So metaphorically speaking, or actually speaking, I'm thinking, okay, what can that mean? What does it mean when we have all this laying down of things in order for things to be accomplished? What would that say to you, if anything?
There's nowhere to go but up.
There's nowhere to go but up. That's not bad. You know, that'd be kind of a flippant remark for Easter, but yes, in some ways, I would say that's true. What else would you say?
We have to give of ourselves. That's what that is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that one of the things that the gospel lesson is trying to say, metaphorically speaking, is that it is in the laying down of things, and it doesn't necessarily mean giving something up. Just laying it down, just letting it go. It's in the letting go of things, the laying down of things, that what really needs to be accomplished happens. We spend a lot of time trying to lift everything up, not realizing that in the story, at least the gospel story, has already been done for us. That lifting up, God does the lifting up. What we need to do in response is to lay it down. We are so busy trying to lift it up and carry it that we never put it down enough so that we can be lifted up. And I think that's a really great message for the whole Holy Week experience. One of the things that we can do, and that we're invited to do during this Holy Week experience, and through this whole gospel lesson, and in everything that Nell and her choir and everyone else is bringing this morning, the music, is the whole idea of being joyful for the laying down of it, for letting it go, for not having to carry it. It's not necessary. So many of us carry the baggage and the other things that we don't need. And I've said this before, but never have I seen it so clearly as when somebody will go so far to prove it as to actually lay down one's life, his life, and say, okay, I'll go. What is it going to take? All right, I will give you the ultimate. If I laid down my life for you, would you still react and be the same person? And unfortunately, I think that most of us would still be the same person because we are not ready to have it laid down for us. We always, it's like a penny. We see it there, we just can't let it lay. We have to pick it up. Maybe that penny needs to be there. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't pick up loose change, because the church can always use whatever you'd like to contribute. There are envelopes in the pews. You know, that's my pew. But the whole idea of just letting it be, laying it down, as the way to accomplish the purpose, the end. That is something that we don't do enough. I mean, we're encouraged to do that when we come up to communion. We're encouraged to lay it all down and saying, I'm going to leave it here. I would really like, if a preacher had his or her way, this is what they want. They want a lot of mess at the altar rail. Leave it here. Don't take it back with you. You're encouraged, you're invited, it's open, leave it here. But don't take it back with you. Jesus could take it back with him. He was lifted up on the cross, which is just, it's not a very pretty picture of lifting up. But the reason he was lifted up and not just nailed down on a cross and laid on the ground, the whole idea was that, yes, Jesus is lifted up, but that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is that he lays it down and it's taken down, and at the end of the story, he's finally laid down in the tomb. That's the end of the story. Those are the key words for me, that we need to lay it down in order for us to really finally, at Easter, be lifted up.